lasting. The last thing that she sent me. Let's see. I'm like listening to music, so I'm probably not gonna. It's fine. I should still be able to hear myself read. In Being and Time and works of that period, Heidegger argued that there is a fundamental pre-linguistic level of significations which forms the foundation of language. Two significations, Heidegger wrote, words accrue. Thus, language was taken to be derivative of our pre-linguistic familiarity with the world. Paradoxically, however, Heidegger simultaneously held that discourse, Rid, in contrast to language, Sprach, is ontologically fundamental in articulating the significance of the world. There is language only because there is discourse, not the other way around. But discourse seems to be a linguistic phenomenon of some sort or other. After all, reden in colloquial German just means to talk or to speak. In the years after the publication of Being and Time, Heidegger increasingly turned his attention to the interdependence of language, being, and thinking. By as early as 1932, he seemed to revise his view of the derivative status of language, holding that where there is no language, there is no understanding of being. In his later work, language, and especially poetic language, became a central focus of Heidegger's work. Section 1, Heidegger's expressive constitutivism. Oh, bro's a constitutionalist, all right. In the 1920s, Heidegger claimed that words and language are founded on pre-linguistic significations that make up the structure of the world. These pre-linguistic primary meanings are the relationships or involvements that entities have with us and other beings in a practical situation. For example, the meaning of a door when I am navigating through a building is for going in and out. This meaning thus arises within our activity of comporting ourselves purposefully and understandingly in the world. Meaning, die Beruntung, die Beruntung is dependent on an act of making cis, das Beduten, die Bedeutung, and das Beduten. And the result of the act of making sense is dependent on an act Oh, sorry, what? And the result of the act of making sense is in each case a meaning, no, not a so-called word meaning, but this primary meaning to which a word can then accrue discourse can accrue. Discourse, rere, means that the system of primary meanings. Okay, sorry. Discourse names the system of primary meanings that sustain us as we comport ourselves purposefully and understandingly in the world. Daizun lives in these meanings, and it is to them that words accrue. In the years following the publication of Being in Time, however, Heidegger's views on language apparently changed. In Being in Time, Heidegger had claimed that words and language are founded upon significations. Next to this passage, Heidegger jotted in the margins of his personal copy of Being in Time. Untrue. Language is not another story raised on top. Along similar lines, Heidegger observed in his personal notes on Being in Time, if anything, it is the other way around. Language is the original, and discourse is founded on it. Some commenters see this as a sign that Heidegger realized that his earlier work had failed to appreciate the role that ordinary language plays in constituting or our engagement with the world. Gadamer, for instance, claims that oh my god. Gadamer, for instance, claims that Heidegger came to see that all thinking is confined to language, as a limit as well as a possibility. Because Heidegger insists in his later essays that language plays a foundational role in opening up and manifesting the world, Charles Taylor places Heidegger in the expressive constitutive tradition of Herder and Humboldt. Taylor distinguishes between instrumental or inframing theories of language on the one hand and expressive constitutive theories on the other. An inframing theory attempts to understand language within the framework of a picture of human life, behavior, purpose, or mental functioning, which is itself described and defined without reference to language. On the inframing model, then, the framework of meaning that orders human life proceeds, or at least can be categorized independently of language. In his later work, Heidegger dismisses this kind of approach to language as one that treats words like handles, griff, that grasp that which already is. Instead, his is an expressive constitutive theory, according to which language enters into or makes possible a whole range of crucially human feelings, activities, and relations, and thus bursts the framework of pre-linguistic life forms, and therefore renders any inframing account inadequate. In broad outlines, Taylor is certainly correct that Heidegger in his later essays offers of an some variety or other of an expressive constitutivist account of language. Heidegger holds, for instance, that language is not that happening in which, each time, beings are first disclosed as beings. Or he argues that the essence of language is a world is a world forming power that first performs the being of entities in advance and brings them into structure. Wait, I gotta read that again. Heidegger holds, for instance, that language is that happening in which each time beings are first disclosed as beings, or he argues that The essence of language is a world-forming power that first performs the being of entities in advance and brings them into structure, preforms the beings of entities in advance. But to know precisely what this expressive constitutive this expressive constitu- constitute constitutivism, okay, what this expressive constitutivism amounts to, we need to resolve several questions. First and foremost, what does language, or the essence of language, name in passages like those? After all, Heidegger warns us repeatedly that it would be a misunderstanding to import our ordinary, common sense conceptions of language into his account. And he insists paradoxically that the essence of language cannot be anything linguistic. To know what Heidegger's account of language amounts to, we need to clarify what Heidegger takes language to be. Next, what exactly does it mean to say that language forms or discloses the world? Does language bring to light and make manifest things that have a character that in some way independent that have a character that is in some way independent of language? Or is language a bringing about or producing? Or is it something in between? Is it a forming or shaping of something that exerts constraints on language? Finally, how can we make sense of the claim that it is language, not humans, that speaks? In his earlier work, language names a totality of words or a totality of utterances, a systemic whole of signs that we can draw on in expressing ourselves linguistically. In his later work, by contrast, Heidegger uses language to refer to the background constitution of significance. In the later Heidegger, language, Sprach, replaces discourse, Red, as Heidegger's preferred translation of the Greek logos. But Heidegger, more or less, consistently understands logos, in the Greek sense, as a gathering of meaningful elements into a unified structure, a meaningful articulation of the world on the basis of which entities can be unconcealed and linguistic acts can be performed. This language conditions the language we speak, but it is not itself something linguistic. Thus, Rathall, for instance, argues that the later Heidegger's emphasis on language is, to a considerable degree, a terminological change rather than a new substantive appreciation of the role played by ordinary language in disclosing the world. Evidence for this can be seen in the fact that as late as 1957, Heidegger still insisted that discourse and discoursing can never be determined by speaking and language. In his later work on language, then, Heidegger consistently draws a distinction between, on the one hand, language in the ordinary or customary sense, and on the other hand, what he calls original language or the essence of language. What is language? Everyone knows that. To question of what language is, there has long been a customary answer. Language is an expression of our inner experiences, ideas, opinions, wishes, and statements in the form of sound and writing. Because it is such an expression, it serves to present what has been experienced for communicating and understanding. This characterization of language, which even today seems more or less clearly, underlies all thinking about it. This characterization is correct, and yet it is deeply untrue because its only grasp of language, that which is a consequence of its essence, but not the essence itself. Because it only grasp of language that which is a consequence. Language in the customary sense is taken as a tool or means for expression or communication, and it is understood to consist in a stock of words or rules for combining them. But this ordinary language, Heidegger explains, is merely a foreground aspect of language. At the time, it is hard to see how ordinary language could function independently of ordinary language. There is thus an ongoing debate whether Heidegger attributes to ordinary language an essential constitutive role in structuring the world or not. Heideggerian, Heideggerian, Heideggerian pragmatists claim that for Heidegger, it is our practical comportment that uncovers meanings, while ordinary language does not play a necessary role in structuring our engagement with the world. Opponents argue that our worlds are not in fact thoroughly pervaded by talk, that idle talk, Gerede, is an existential feature in constituting that the there, and that our practical coping is seamlessly integrated with talk, thus suggesting that coping itself has a conceptual structure. But the pragmatists, of course, do not deny that we talk constantly, or that learning a language is an important part of coming to share a particular understanding of the significance of things. The pragmatist point is rather that while the meaningful articulation of the world can and does involve linguistic acts, the linguistic articulation is grounded in and dependent on a kind of intelligibility that is neither produced by nor expressible in ordinary language. Some commentators take the later Heidegger claims about language to be claims about particular natural languages. Thus, when Heidegger, for instance, claims that language is the house of being, the font takes Heidegger as holding that meaning depends on the definite conceptualization available through the particular lexicon of a particular language. On her interpretation of Heidegger, natural languages restrict not just what is possible to say, but also what is possible to experience and encounter. In a similar way, Hatab takes language in the later Heidegger to be the language we learn as children and come to speak normally, our mother tongue as such. Language is not primarily an individual faculty, but a public communicative practice. True. Whoa. Sorry, I just heard this like fire ass fucking. Tell me. Oh, it's a whole album or an EP, technically. Oh, I fucking love this. I just want to listen to this EP real quick. The examples of later Heidegger, and the examples the later Heidegger offers of the language he has in mind, however, he never identifies them with particular natural languages. For instance, Heidegger writes, I'm going to put both earbuds in and see how I feel with reading. Some time ago, I called language, clumsily enough, the house of being. If human beings, through their language, live as they are called upon by being, then we Europeans presumably live in a different house than the East Asians do. Heidegger seems to think, then, that all Europeans inhabit the same house, or language, as do all East Asians. This undermines the proposal that language is really to be identified with a particular ordinary. Historically, specific language like French or German or Japanese or Chinese or Korean. The same holds true of another key example. Heidegger holds that around the globe, all people already speak the language of the inventory. Whatever this language is, it is clearly not identical with any particular natural language. In an attempt to preserve a connection between language in the ordinary sense and original language, some scholars adopt a hybrid view. Golub, for instance, argues that language. Oh my god, bro. Fucking keyboard broken? I'm trying to figure out why I can't scroll. Come on, bro. An attempt to preserve a connection between language and origin. The fuck, bro? Maybe I won't listen to the whole EP because some of those songs had words in them. I don't think. Okay. In an attempt to preserve a connection between language in the ordinary sense and ordinary language, some scholars adopt a hybrid view. Golub, for instance, argues that language in the later Heidegger refers to both language in the standard sense and something like a unifying gathering. The thought is that Heidegger should be taken not as designating something other than ordinary languages with the word language, but rather as objecting to certain theoretical ways of modeling language. Similarly, Young offers a Wittgensteinian reading that treats language as a social practice that involves a complex integration of words, things, moods, feelings, actions, and commentaries on actions, which constitutes, in Wittgenstein's phrase, a form of life. Other scholars, like Withy and Rethel, approach the word language in the later Heidegger oh, fuck me. Okay, hold on. Meadow. Okay, we're gonna Metonymy. Is that how it's metonymy? So this would be metonymically, 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 metonymically. The substitution of the name of an attribute or adjunct for that of that thing meant. For example, suit for business exec, or the track for horse racing. Oh, okay. Which concept is referred to by the naming of something associated with that thing or concept. All right, cool. The word language in later Heidegger, metonymically, so it's like mononymy, metonymically. So it's like that. Okay. It's gonna have words in it. Oh no, that's just fucking hard ass DMB break chord type shit. That is, they take Heidegger not as predicating new properties of ordinary language, but rather as extending the use of the word language to name something which is intimately connected with language in the ordinary sense. And what could be more intimately connected with ordinary language than the articulation into significations that is its enabling condition? Language, Heidegger explains, is the revealing itself, and not primarily the subsequent expression of this revealing of things. Language is the revealing itself. The utterance, almost. That makes sense. In these different interpretations of Heidegger's account of language, what is ultimately at stake is the right way to hear claims like language is the house of being or language is a world-forming power. If one takes language in the later Heidegger to refer to language in the standard sense, then one ends up taking claims like these as saying something like, that which we ordinarily refer to as language is the house of being and is a world-forming power. Alternatively, One can take Heidegger not as predicating new properties of ordinary language, but rather as metonymically using the word language to refer to something which is intimately connected with language in the ordinary sense. Thus, sorry, thus on the Thus, on the metonymic reading, Heidegger should be understood as saying something like, that which houses beings and forms worlds, whatever it is what we now will designate as language. Whitty puts this latter interpretation well. If being a house of being is what makes something a language, then the status. Hold on. I just want to put like so many of these songs on this playlist real quick. I fucking love these songs. Underground. Woody puts this way. If being a house of being is what makes something a language, then the status is conferred not on what possesses a vocabulary and a grammar, but on what prediscloses the world and prediscovers entities by harboring ontological commitments. Human language speaks by listening to, bringing itself into conformity with, and responding to the originary language. The originary language, in turn, is neither merely nor primarily the oral or written expression of what needs to be communicated. The conveying of overt and covert meanings is not what language, in the first instance, does. Rather, it brings beings as beings for the first time into the open. This brings us to the second question outlined above, namely, how exactly should we understand the world's disclosive function of language? Language as versus language as producing. Man, I could finish. I could finish reading all this. I kind of want to be a lazy bitch and not finish it, though. I'm gonna be honest. Yeah, I'm gonna be a lazy bitch and not finish it. Thank you for being here with me, reading for about like 25 minutes. I love you, I love you, I love you, and I hope you guys are well. Have a great day. Bye.